We're going to do some introductory stuff first. Obviously, we're going to talk about dog behavior, dog ethology, get into how aggression fits into their behavioral repertoire. Then we're going to focus on dog-dog aggression first, and then we'll move into dog-people aggression. There are also many ways to categorize aggressive behavior. You can look specifically at the victim and categorize it, or the target, I guess I should say, and categorize it that way. You can categorize it in many, many different ways. This one is loosely based on the idea of what's the motivation behind the behavior. So it's the classification scheme that I use most often, but I want to make it clear, and I'm sure it'll be clear over the next couple of days, that these categories are not mutually exclusive. So you can have the dog behaving aggressively for different motivations. So going through these, I have fear at the top for a reason. I really do think that fear underlies a tremendous amount of what we're seeing with dogs that are behaving aggressively. Even when it doesn't look like it sometimes, I think if you go back to the development of the behavior, you'll often see that it's based in fear. Territorial and protective, I have lumped together there. I'm going to come back and talk about that a little. I don't have them lumped together. I have them underneath each other. They often get lumped together, and I will talk to you about how I differentiate those. Possessive aggression, or also called resource guarding, that we assume has some motivation around maintaining or gaining access to something that the dog wants. Okay, so parameters that you can play with when it comes to desensitization and counter conditioning: the proximity of the stimulus, the context in which you're in, the intensity of the stimulus, a quiet kid versus kids screaming, the duration of the presentation or the duration of the eye contact. Either works. The frequency of the presentation. Some dogs benefit from a lot of repetitions. Some dogs can only handle a few repetitions, and then they need a long break in between. I have the controllability down there. That's a little more esoteric, but in some cases it seems to be helpful if the dog can control the presentation of the stimulus. That certainly is a feature in dealing with people, with desensitization and counter conditioning with fears. It really helps if the people can control the presentation. I think we're going to move straight into dog aggression to people. And probably the most common thing we deal with are dogs. I went away. There we go. Dogs that are aggressive to strangers. And as usual, there are plenty of different options that we have at our disposal to use. Sometimes it's simply a case of working on socialization. Is this dog safe enough that we can expose them to more people and get them better socialized and see if we can improve their attitude towards strangers? More often than not, you're going to use desensitization and counter conditioning as well, even if you are working on socialization, bringing the dog into situations where there are strangers and associating the presence of strangers with something wonderful. Response substitution is another option where the dog learns to do something else in the presence of people, and probably the most common technique that we use is a targeting response. So when the dog is in the presence of a stranger, they either target on the owner or they target on the stranger if it's safe to do that. Safety signal conditioning I'll talk about in a minute, and then positive punishment in very, very rare circumstances. So this is the procedure that we go through. We identify appropriate place for the dog, and I do like the dog to be able to see what's happening at the front door. We teach the dog a remote sit and or down. It's usually good to have both. Teach a remote stay so that you can be on a different floor and tell the dog to stay and they will still stay. teach them to go to that spot, and then teach them to go to that spot and stay. Then introduce mild distractions, and by that I mean you pretend there's someone at the door. You go, oh, I think I heard the doorbell, and you go, you better go up to your spot, and there's not really anyone there. And then you move up to more moderate distractions where maybe you knock on the table as if someone's knocking on the door, or you have someone stationed outside to ring the bell every now and then, but you don't actually answer the door. And then you build up to that where you have mock visitors, people that are coming and coming and going and coming and going, so you get a lot of repetitions in before you ever expose the dog to the real thing.